So here's the front of the Jeep without components on the component board, but the component board, how it's going to sit in the future. It looks pretty much the same. We took a notch out of the back corner there, and we've moved the whole board back about an inch so that we clear against the front here. We haven't installed the hinge yet, but it's going to hinge from the front here. It's going to hinge back. And we're going to have plenty of clearance for the charger to come up. You could do this thing vertically and have clearance. We're not going to design it to go totally vertical. We just have to have accessibility to the cells below. So, run out of time for today, so this is how far I got, but let me show you what's underneath it. So here's what we have now. We removed the all-thread risers that used to mount in the four corners like this and held that plate up. They're just not real rigid. And one thing I noticed that I wanted to mention, that on the bottom it was, going through a mount, but there was no lock washer. Automotive environment is tough, a lot of vibration and so forth, and so you always want to use some type of locking method, whether it be, chemical like Loctite, a locking nut such as a nylon stop nut, or a locking washer. And there's different types for different applications. But something, because without it, this will vibrate and then this would loosen up and we'd have some problems. So just want to share that as these things catch my attention. I'll share them with you. You can see here these bolts have nylon stop nuts on them, and we've gone through few threads, and that's the way those work properly. You want to have the correct length so that you have a few threads go through the nylon. And these now are bolted to the box. And that board is going to rest on top of that box. And these pieces are holding our cells down. We've got the bad cells sitting in here right now, but they're keeping these cells from being able to go up and down, which was the issue we were wanting to solve. The other was being able to access these cells to clean them, check the torque on the interconnects, take voltage readings, whatever you want to do. We just want to have accessibility. And you may not do that very often. Once a year, or using these Nord-Lock washers, when we first started using them, we checked once a month for our first few months, and we went every 6 months, and we went to a year. We found we didn't have any issues with them. I don't bother checking them at all anymore. But it's nice to be able to, especially in a box like this that's not sealed and dirt and debris can get in here, we want to have that ability to access this and do whatever. So that's what we've come up with. This is really strong. I mean, I can shake the whole car with it really well. And so it's going to be locked down. There's going to be another angle here. One, we're going to have our hinge point here and here. And then on the other side, there's going to be a piece of angle that it's like this, is going to come down, and it's going to be bolted to this piece, and then when that top lowers down, we'll bolt through into it. And that's what will hold it down in the front. So that board is rigidly mounted also. But it's one of the nuts that's holding on the coolant pump is gone, so it's being held on with one. And so I kind of think it didn't have a lock washer, so we'll fix that. But a lot to do, but we're making good progress. The cells have been ordered, as I mentioned earlier. We've got our hold down system in place. It's going well. So I'll be back once I've had an opportunity to do the hinge and the lockdown. That's my next step. And then we're going to start updating that component board so that things are attached to it a little more securely and permanently. Well, the component board is now mounted, and it is rigid. I mean, not going to go anywhere. But as I mentioned before, we wanted it to be able to hinge up for accessibility to our cells underneath. And so we've designed it to hinge, as I said that we would, so that we could actually install the batteries with this in place. So I don't know if we'll install the cells with it in place or not yet. Probably not, just because we don't want anything in the way. But we'll see. But what this does is it gives us accessibility to the cells at any point, down the road. And this can go all the way perfectly vertical. And the distance between the cowling and the plate is more than enough to accommodate having the components on the board. So you can see we have plenty of accessibility here to put the cells in. And the way it's designed is we remove a bolt here, and this centerpiece pivots out of the way, and you can put all the cells in because the terminals are lower than that center raise point on the cell, which means that this is holding the cell down, but we can slide underneath it without touching a terminal. So we would put all the cells in place, bolt this back down, and then wire your interconnects. Meanwhile, all your components are mounted on the top side of this board. And that's what we're going to do next, is we're going to design the layout here. We're not really going to change what they originally had. They're not totally reinventing the wheel here. That was not the objective. But we will do things in such a way that allows the pivoting of the board here so that wires and hoses and stuff don't have a problem. You can see we rerouted the brake vacuum line. Instead of it going up, it's going down, which is I think better anyway. But nothing's in the way now. The charger sets up, so these two bolts will actually be underneath the charger. And like I said, we're going to drill and tap all the mounts so that everything is mounted, lock washered in place. Things that you might want. Well, You know what, we might just go ahead and put stop nuts. I mean, because you can raise this up, you have accessibility, so, yeah. That's coming up. That'll be next, to get this, prepped. And then work on all the 12-volt stuff. Check each system individually, make sure everything's working. And the first one we're going to do is we're going to disconnect any of the conversion stuff, and just leave the Jeep stuff and test and make sure that the Jeep wiring is working first and everything's okay there, and then we'll move on to the conversion. Just because I don't want to complicate things. If there's some problems with the Jeep, let's find that out now. And because we came in the middle of the project, this Jeep was restored, and it's a new wiring harness and everything. It was a total chassis off restoration. So I don't know if those systems have been tested yet. So we're going to do that. It's not a big deal to disconnect the few things that are part of the conversion. The way that we do it is that we come off of the positive terminal and go to a terminal strip, and that allows us to take all of our unswitched 12-volt sources from one spot, such as what this is here. It's only got 2 terminals. Might replace that with a large one. And then the conversion stuff that is switched, ignition switched, we'll just take an ignition source to activate a relay, such as this one right here. And then that relay takes power directly from the battery and takes it to our fuse block. So you turn on the ignition, it activates a relay, and then all of our fuse things come directly off the battery. We do not affect the existing wiring of a vehicle at all, except for that small milliampere draw that we're going to use to power the coil on a relay. That's it. So we're going to make sure that this is done that way also. And so we'll track and see where some of these things go. Instead of having a bunch of things coming off the battery terminal here, I would just like to have the car stuff, the Jeep chassis stuff come off the battery, and the DC to DC converter come directly to the battery at the most. So we've got a few additional ones here that we'll make go away. But next, like I said, we'll put the components on here. Nice thing, hinging from the back, the charger, which is by far the heaviest item that goes on this board, is right here in the back, right over the hinge. So that'll allow it to hinge easily. The next heaviest is the controller, which is right here. And then the DC to DC converter, which was right here. And then up front was all lighter components. And so we might move those around. They may stay in the same place. I'll see how I'll lay it out and see how I like it, and see what's going to make the shortest cable runs and what's going to be the best for the controller. The cooling lines are going down. It's not a big deal to just angle those so they go back. The other thing with the controller is that I've got it sitting on a table right over here. The chill plate is leaking. The mating surface between the chill plate and the bottom of the inverter did not seal completely. And so there's a leak there. So that means we have to take that apart, which is a pain. I've done it before. It's not something you want to do. So the recommendation there is that you make sure that your mating surfaces are smooth and clean. And we spend, a fair amount of focus on making sure that's so that once you put it, because that's the last thing we check typically is the cooling system. That's the last thing that we complete, the last thing that gets checked. And you don't want to have to pull things apart. So that doesn't normally happen to us. Like I said, we put a lot of care and attention to make sure that that's well sealed. So that's on the upcoming to-do list. Matter of fact, that's probably one of the next things, get that taken care of. So then we can start mounting these components. And the three main components, like I said, controller, DC to DC converter, and the charger. And instead of these little tiny, I haven't checked yet to see if that's an 8 or a 10. The holes here almost look like number 8 screws. Anyway, we're going to beef it up, go with the 1/4 inch, go with a locking mechanism so that things won't vibrate loose. And that's it. The two lockdown bolts on the front here go into a threaded piece here, and then they have a lock washer. So it's easy to access, will be easy to do going forward in the future. And we'll see once it gets done. We'll demonstrate everything. So won't like I said earlier, that's another thing that's coming up. Before I get to the 12-volt stuff, we'll be mounting the throttle and the coolant reservoir. So still got a lot of things to do. One of the things when you're doing a conversion, like a lot of builds where you're fabricating and building something, is this plate's been in and out multiple times because you're fitting and adjusting and so forth, testing, and it will be out again because there's this is an original cut. We didn't do this, but where it was notched here, this is just a jagged edge and everything. We'll remove all of that, just like we did, where we cut it here, nice and smooth, no sharp edges. Here, there's lots of sharp edges. So get rid of that so that when you're working on something, you don't slice yourself up, and it's easy enough to do. So do yourself a favor and don't leave any sharp knife type edges that will cause you bloodshed. Well, here's the throttle, and so it was hanging between the bottom of the battery box and this component plate, and then levers pulled that way, and it was done so by this rod right here. Hang on, let me see if I can get a better angle here. So this is how it was activated. Let's take a look at this side. And so there's just no pivoting. Hey, finger loose. We'll get rid of this rod. We'll take it out of here. And then we'll come up with something else that will allow this to activate our throttle, and we'll mount the throttle on our rigid surface. There's going to be a lot of cleanup in here. This is just, I don't know, stuff's hanging in the way and stuff. I know that was left in the middle probably wasn't finished, obviously, but that's something I think needs to be done before it gets turned over to the young lady to want to drive this thing. The owners aren't going to do it, so we'll clean it up. You know, just tie it up and everything. It's not much to do that. But the throttle is going to take a little more thought, as well as that coolant reservoir. Well, we relocated the coolant reservoir, and you can see we can put the component board up, not quite vertical, we're probably at 70 degrees there. We relocated and mounted the vacuum pump and the vacuum reservoir. And let me drop this down real quick here. Drop it down like that. And we haven't put the rest of our components on yet, but that's coming up. So, working on the controller chill plate, cleaning that right now. Then we'll reseal that. It was bad. I mean, it leaked like a sieve, and when I went to separate the two, I've never seen one come apart so easily. So I don't know what the issue was, but yeah, but it's a mess to clean up, and so that's what we're in the midst of doing, cleaning that. And of course that's going to go here. We'll route the wires to the motor over the back, and all the wiring is going to the rear, so we can hinge without any issues. We tested the auxiliary battery. It's 11.9 volts, so we're going to put it on the charger. And we disconnected everything except for the chassis wiring. So it goes through here, through this fuse, and goes down. And that's all I can see thus far. But I'll check and see, but everything else looked like it was non-chassis related. So I hooked up the battery, which I'll do for you right now, and as soon as I did, I saw that the brake lights came on. So why are the brake lights on? Well, I check under the dash here, check on the switch, which is going to be hard to see if you can even see it. But the brake switch is right up. I'll see if I can reach it with my other hand so you can see. Yeah. You can't see it, really. Maybe if I shoot from the other angle, but there's going to be a lot of wires in the way. But it's just on the other side of the spring that's showing right there. Let's see if I can zoom in. But because it's dark, it may not. The issue is that it's just missing from being engaged. There's about an 1/8 of an inch gap that is preventing. There it is. You can see that little arm to the right of the spring and everything. That's what activates. There's the switch. You can see it now. So it's just, the switch isn't being activated. So I'm going to see if I can adjust that switch so when the brake pedal's out, the lights go out. And that's issue number 1. Then I'm going to go through and check, make sure that the turn signals and things like that work, just as a courtesy. And then we'll start doing the conversion wiring, inspecting it, making sure it's, well, I'm going to have to redo a lot of it, that's all there is to it. And then checking the crimps. We've already found a lot of bad crimps. So just go through and make sure everything's okay. But that's the first thing that, you know, came up is the brake lights. And since the battery's low, let me go disconnect that ground. So that's where we are. Of course, in the process, we'll clean up that rat's nest, the wires right there. We're able to keep these things in the same location, so I did not have to run new hose or anything. Matter of fact, could have cut this hose right here, shortened it. And but anyway, once we get further down the line, we'll start checking all those systems, and we'll check and make sure that, you know, the pump runs, that we don't have vacuum leaks, that type of thing.